Hello, I am Desiree Vargas Wrigley, and I am the Chief Innovation Officer at P33 and Executive Director of a program we have called TechRise. Today, I'm going to tell you a little bit about how we do our 4-minute pitch framework for all of our founders. This framework has been really successful. We've had 200 founders take the stage. Many of them have won somewhere between $25,000 and $50,000. I think we've done about 64 competitions. And those founders have gone on to raise over or just at $50 million in follow-on funding in about 18 months. So this framework works. I'll tell you a little bit about what it is and what it isn't. This is a stage pitch framework. So anytime you need to pitch in a virtual pitch competition, on a stage for a showcase, even actually and sometimes for your first calls with investors, this framework works great. What it's not is like a full-blown partner meeting framework. Those are longer, they have more detail. And so we can talk more about that in another episode. But today we're going to focus specifically on how to win non-dilutive capital in a pitch. I guess I should tell you a little bit more about me too. I am a 2-time Latina founder here in Chicago. I built my first company, Give Forward, in 2008 with my partner, my co-founder, Ethan Austin, and we help people raise about $200 million for that. It's now part of GoFundMe. We pitched a lot of people, heard a lot of no's. So part of this framework is based on what we learned to do right and wrong. My second company, Parachute, was on Shark Tank, where we got, at the time, one of the biggest deals in Shark Tank history. So definitely use this framework for that. And then I taught at Kellogg at Northwestern, the MBA students, this framework. So I've been using it for quite a while, and it really does work. So I hope you get as much out of it as some of our other founders have. All right, and with that, I'm going to go into sharing. All right, so TechRise is a pitch competition. We deploy somewhere between $25,000 and $50,000 every week to founders of color and women identifying founders that are Chicago connected. And we do it in partnership with Verizon and many other sponsors. And this framework we use every single month with our founders. The goal of it really is to help founders have a packaged pitch that they can use and timestamp from our recordings that we have on YouTube, but also so that every time they go out to pitch after, they will have a better chance of concisely saying what it is that their business is about. And so with that, I'm going to get us started. All right, so the real goal here is to get investors excited about your business, not to tell them every single feature set, every single nuance of how the business works. It's about helping them identify an insight that you've already identified and helping them easily see how it fits into the world and how it can scale. But the key to a great pitch really is taking whoever's listening, whether it's an audience of judges, it's friends, or it's investors, maybe it's even a bank, actually, if you're going to apply for a loan. You want to take them on a story arc that puts the information in their brain at the time that their brain is ready for it. So there is an art and a science to this. The science is what we're going to be talking about today, and then the art I'll try to weave in as much as possible. But the goal here really is to take them on this journey where we take them out of whatever they were just thinking about, whether it's email, a text message from their spouse, the last pitch they just heard, and bringing them into your world where they understand the corner of the universe that you're tackling. Specifically, they'll understand the problem that you're trying to solve. They'll understand what your solution is, how it works, why it's such a big opportunity, then how you're going to go after this massive opportunity, who else is going after this massive opportunity, what milestones and projections have you already reached that indicate that you have traction or that I can believe you, that you're the one to execute on this. And then you're further going to kind of convince them that it's why you and your team and why now is the right time for this. And then finally, you kind of want to tie a bow on the whole thing and help them understand how the world looks different when you succeed. All right, we're going to break that down a little bit more now. Okay, so first we're starting out with contextualizing the problem. And the goal here, like I said, is really to take them out of whatever they were just thinking about. It could be their grocery shopping. It could be that their coffee wasn't made correctly. People are going from somewhere else in their brain into where you want them to go. And you can't just hit them right away with the numbers or the stats because they haven't transitioned yet. And so the best way to get them to transition is to put them into, like I said, the corner of the universe where you want them to pay attention. And a great way to do this is to provoke the frontal cortex with almost like a flight or fight response. What you want to do is give them something that shocks them a little bit and makes them think like, oh, yes, that's right. Or, I didn't know that. Or, that's horrible. What are we going to do about it? Something that just is new, novel, that gets them out of where they were. Anything that kind of makes them say, wow, I didn't realize that. Okay, so when you're doing this, there's several different ways to do it. It kind of depends on who you're pitching, what the audience is. If you're dealing with like a highly analytical person, they're really going to want to get into the substance soon. So you might want to give them numbers sooner rather than later. If it's someone who's an early stage investor, usually they're kind of operating from a place of they want something cool that no one else has seen yet. So novelty is a critical piece of this kind of move or this tactic. And I'm going to give you a quick example of how I have done this for my company, Parachute. So when we were preparing for Shark Tank, there were a couple of different ways that we could do this. One was to say something along the lines of like, did you know that there's a $170 billion a year category that parents, mostly women, spend between 4 and 6 hours a month trying to plan for and spend against. And yet there's no marketplace that solves the problem. So see what I did was I took them out of wherever they were and told them, I'm going to tell you about spending for kids. I'm going to tell you about a massive market opportunity, and I'm going to tell you a little bit about where the problem is. Another way to do it, though, is to tug a little bit more on the emotional heartstrings. So what we ended up doing for Shark Tank was something more, we thought, kind of universally recognizable. And so we did something more like, when you are a parent, there is this moment when your kids are doing something that they love and they're smiling and they're running around and your heart wells and you feel for this moment like, yes, I did it. That's what we do every single day for tens of thousands of parents on Parachute. So it can be anything you want. You can come in like hyper analytical, or you can come in kind of aspirational, but the goal is to bring energy and detail to the corner of the universe of where you're trying to solve a problem. But it's not enough just to say like, oh, there's this $170 billion a year problem that parents don't have a marketplace for, because it doesn't actually help them fully understand the depth of the problem. So you do want to take them from the corner of the universe into defining the problem more specifically that you're going to solve, right? Because the $170 billion a year kids activity space could mean we're going to go after birthday parties, we're going to go after summer camps. And so you need to specifically say what your business is going to solve within that little area that you've just described. So here's, so really the voiceover on the first one can be your logo in the background. It can be an image of something that you want them to kind of convey. It should not be heavy words on that first slide. The next slide, though, defining the problem, is where you can use bullets to describe a multifaceted problem, or kind of a single slide that indicates what it is that you are defining as the problem. In the Parachute example, what we described, the two problems were that one, parents struggle to find activities that their kids are going to like, and it's really expensive for them to experiment because they have to sign up for 10 weeks at a time, and a $300 soccer program for an 18-month-old is pretty risky. But at the same time, we have these artists, musicians, performers that don't have marketing savvy, aren't technical founders. They don't know how to find their perfect customers. And so that's the problem that we're trying to solve. Two-sided marketplace. Other people who can solve it differently. So here's an example of one of our winners from TechRise. That's a cybersecurity company helping small and medium-sized businesses access cybersecurity professionals on demand when they need it. So they go very specifically into the problem with the market is that existing freelancer platforms lack the quality, trust, and governance that cybersecurity experts or cybersecurity companies need. So we've taken them to the corner of the universe that we want them to understand the problem that we're solving. Then we've specifically defined the problem that we are tackling with our business solution. And that's when we want to say what our solution is. And here, a lot of founders make the mistake of saying what it is plus how it works in the same slide. And the reason you don't want to do that is because you need to give them something to kind of latch onto that says concisely what it is that you do. So this is kind of your one-liner elevator pitch. You can have images around it. You can have, anything that you think kind of reinforces what it is that you do, but you don't want them to get distracted by the how it works when you're saying what your solution is. So, for us, we were just clearly saying that we're an online marketplace that helps busy parents discover and book activities their kids will love and help providers find customers that they'll have for years to come, something along those lines. Some other examples from our TechRise founders. One is the Cube. So that's a curated platform to discover the best BIPOC and queer trans people of color podcasts. So it's super clear, right? You want this slide to be able to be passed along. And when this deck gets passed along to other partners, that people understand, okay, specifically, this is what it is. So I'm an investor. I just heard the corner of the universe that we're trying to solve. I heard specifically the problem that this company is going after, and now I understand the solution, and I'm asking myself, okay, I want to see how it works. Like, what's under the hood? This makes sense so far. I'm buying it. Let's see what's next. The how it works side is really where you get to use the most words or visuals, depending on how complicated it is. This is where you want to say, the user journey, or if you're a two-sided marketplace, the two-sided user journey. It's where you can have bullet points that explain how it works, but it is probably the only slide that you have the permission to have a lot of text or visuals, because your voiceover can explain it, but you don't want people to get stuck reading. So all these previous slides and all the slides we're going to talk about in the future should be light on words, and the subject of every slide should really be what you want the listener or audience to take away in that moment. So some great how it works examples. One of our companies, Grapefruit Health, is a platform that helps aspiring nurses get credit hours by linking them with seniors who need support. And so this is showing exactly how it works. You can have, okay, so we've taken them on this journey to help get them on board, right? Like, we've taken them out of whatever they were working on to understand what problem we're solving, specifically how your company is solving a problem. But the bigger question for them often is like, so what? If the market size is too small, you might have the best new mousetrap ever, but no one's going to buy it, or you're not going to make any money off of it because only 10 people are going to buy it. I guess that can work if you're selling like $200 million yachts, but that's not what most of us are doing. So market size is a critical piece of this story, and it really indicates to your audience that you understand the scale of the problem and what you can actually go after. So much like I referenced the $170 billion a year industry that is kids' activities, the truth is that is not an addressable market for a kids' activity marketplace right off the bat. Eventually, sure, it is. But what was more accessible for us is going after kids' activities for children 0 to 5, because it's before they start school, and it's when parents have the most kind of need for flexibility and experimentation. So for us, the way that we size this market to get to the 170, because often this number isn't easily accessible, you have to go out and put together some different things. We looked at average entertainment spending per household. Then we looked at the number of households with kids under 6. And we used that number plus the average cost of birthday parties to come up with this $170 billion a year number. But then when we size that down to addressable market, we looked at, okay, what is actually happening in the kids' activity space? How many providers are there of these activities across the country? And what is the average drop-in class price? So this is probably one of the harder exercises unless you're in an industry that's really well known, but it is a critical piece of proving to your listener that you understand the market that you're going after. And at the end of the day, the entire purpose of this pitch is to de-risk this business for your audience. You want these investors to say, they really know this market. They really know this industry. They have a clear idea of how they're going to go after it. And so this story arc is what's helping them do that. So one big thing, I think you see it down there in all caps, never ever say, and when we get 1% of this market, we'll be a $1 billion a year company or a $5 billion a year company, because the magic isn't like figuring out what the math is on 1% of the market. The math is how you go after the market to eventually get to that 1%. And most of our companies never get there. So the point of that is that you don't want to put it in a pitch because it makes you look naive. It also is without kind of triangulating the how to get there, it leaves the listener thinking that you are kind of overly optimistic and don't understand what's actually going to take to get to the next level. So now we're going to take you on like the second half of the pitch. And one important thing to know about pitches like this is that the tone of your voice should actually change as you're going through the story arc. So the first part of the story arc is actually a sales voice. It's more high and enthusiastic and energetic. As you get farther into your traction and like who you are and why now, you might want to take a little bit of a lower tone to your voice because it builds credibility and makes people have confidence in you. So keep some of these things in mind. It's not just about the words and it's not just about the slides. It's really about how you present to everyone. All right, so we took them on this journey. We showed them how big the market is. And now we want them to believe us that we know what it takes to go after this market. So we're going to go right into our go-to-market strategies and traction. So go-to-market and traction slides can basically be, depending on where you are in your journey. If you're an idea stage startup, you might want to say something along the lines of, and the typical cost of acquisition in our industry is blank, even so if you don't have it yet. But if you've been in the market and you understand what it takes to acquire a customer, here's where you want to describe what you've learned. So, it might be something like our subscription business in the kids activity space is acquiring full price customers at $28, and we are generating, $60 in revenue from them within the first 2 months. And so far our churn or our retention rates are blank. It's great if you have that. A lot of us don't have that when we're first starting to pitch. So it's more important to talk about how you're going to go after those first 500 customers, 1,000 customers. And, a lot of us rely on social media, and that's absolutely a great way to grow. The problem is it doesn't necessarily scale, right? You can't predict virality, and you can't necessarily predict that your massive audience you purchased or grew on TikTok is going to continue to like all of your content. So what investors want to hear is that you have a scalable and replicable way to get to the next level. So as much as you can here, you want to talk about any indicators that you have that customers love your product or service, and that you know how to go get 10x that number, and you have an idea of what it's going to cost you. For us, for Parachute, we relied very heavily on Facebook ads back in the day and Instagram. That was also, 4 years ago. So the market has changed. Those channels have become increasingly expensive and harder to target. And so people are having to get creative, especially when you're a direct-to-consumer brand. So think about what these investors might be hearing in terms of some of the challenges, and try to de-risk that for them by showing how you've been able to, profitably or in a low cost way acquire these customers. Maybe it's through partnerships. Maybe all of your conversions happen over email, but help us paint the picture of how you're going after the customers you have now and the ones you're going to go after for the next few years. Some great examples here are any kind of insights or unlocks that you have. So, we unlock distribution at scale through strategic partners. Absolutely works. Another example is $25 to acquire a customer, and we think it's somewhere between $1,000 and $10,000 a customer in terms of lifetime value. This kind of just like laying it out for them so they have an understanding of what the real numbers are around your acquisition is really helpful. All right, so the other thing that they're going to want to know is, this is great, right? The problem makes sense. I believe them that this specific problem is one that they can go after. I believe their solution, the how it works makes sense. The market opportunity is massive. I like it. Their go-to-market is believable. It's so great. Who else is doing this? So that's immediately what investors think. They want to understand if they believe in the opportunity, then they want to know where they should place their bet, and they want to make sure that you understand who else is placing bets here too. So here's where you want to describe how your solution or service is unique to others in the market already. And specifically, you want to make sure that you're covering if your nuance or unique components are really feature driven, then often you want to build a slide that has like a bunch of features that your users care about because you've done discovery interviews, and then you show your competitors in the slide. Personally, I never give voiceover to any competitors' names. I don't think it's a good idea to give anyone else airtime. You can put their logos on the site or on the slide, and show where they fall short and where you meet all of the needs of your users, but never talk in detail about a competitor in a pitch like this. If you're in a in-person pitch with an investor, they might start to ask you about some of your competitors, and then I like to say things generically like, well, some of the players in our space do this, some of the players in our space do that, without giving any more names, because basically, like, why would you give them extra exposure? So the other thing here is never say you have no competition. For Parachute, the kids activity marketplace world didn't really exist when we were building it. We did have competitors that were doing the same thing at the same time, but no one had scale, so there was no obvious incumbent. But actually, our biggest competitor in the summer was the park, and our biggest competitor in the winter was going to Target or the grocery store with your kids. So, we had to think differently about the way that we positioned these activities when we thought about the competitive landscape. So are owning kind of an area of one of the quadrants that is not busy, that where you have a unique opportunity to win. So It demonstrates to the audience that you know that there's a lot of competition doing other things, but you've identified an opening in the market that is not being filled and that customers really care about, which means that you need this, the spectrum of these two value sets to be things that actually do matter. It shouldn't be things that are kind of artificially valuable. All right, so we just convinced them that there are other people going after this, but no one's doing it in the way that you are, and so you are better. And now is when I really think it's time to talk about where you're headed. So they believe you, they're like, okay, great. So how big can this company be? So here is where you want to use your financial model. If you can talk about revenues, you can talk about user growth, you can talk about retention, whatever you think the milestones are that are going to get you to the next level of funding, not the current level, is what you want to project here. And so, some people go and show like a 10-year projection of how big the business can be. The problem is that that's a little bit of like hand waving, like who knows how big it's going to be. There's macro trends that could go in your favor or against you. So really demonstrating that you understand what kind of traction you need to hit to get to the next level and what that will mean from a revenue perspective allows the investor to understand where your next valuation mark might be. And then they can do the math for themselves, because that's what they're doing here. They're constantly calculating what is going to be the markup on this business or the follow-on funding or the competitive landscape. Sorry if you hear my dog in the background. All right. So we've convinced them that you're going to go be something massive. Next is and this is where you can also do use of funds, So use of funds is how you're going to take the money that they're giving you and go to the next level. So sometimes you want to talk about key hires. Sometimes you want to talk about how the things that you've learned about customer acquisition will now turn into XY customers because you have $5,000 more a month to spend on Google AdWords or whatever that use of capital is going to be. So the ninth thing that I want, and I should have probably said this at the beginning, but a lot of founders start out their pitch and say something like, hello, I'm Desiree Vargas Wrigley, and I am the CEO of Parachute. And that isn't a long time, it's 5 seconds, but it doesn't give them any reason to care or remember. So when you say your name right off the bat or the name of your business, they're still looking for something to latch onto, which is why it's so important to start with that provocative comment or, thing that gets them excited early on, because really you haven't earned the right for them to remember your name yet or your business. And I know that sounds, a little bit humbling, but that's the truth. Like they see so many different deals and you might be in a pitch competition with 5 other founders. Don't you want them to remember you and your name? And they're only going to do that if you've already kind of like implanted in their brain as an amazing opportunity. So the why you, why now opportunity here is to talk about your team, build credibility. Like, do you have industry expertise? Do you have, some cool pedigree things like someone worked at Google or someone went to Wharton or whatever it is that allows you to show that you have industry expertise, that you are reliable, that you're trustworthy, and that you're going to do an incredible job with this business and be an excellent steward of their money. What you don't want to do here is write like long bios for every team member and put every single advisor you've ever talked to. Like keep it, the voiceover especially, core to the story of this business. And this is actually where I personally think the journey of how you came up with the idea for this business is most appropriately placed. A lot of times we see founders start out with like, oh, well, when I decided, to leave my first startup, I suddenly found myself at home with 2 little boys and I had never been a stay-at-home mom. So I didn't know how to find kids activities, which is fine. It's part of the truth. And that is part of how Parachute was started, but it's not interesting because it just is so, you-centric. How big is that opportunity if it's just about your personal experience? Are you just building a solution for you? But if you've built up to this point and said how big this problem is, and then you're saying something like, this is my second startup, my first startup, I built to 5 million a year in revenue and over 200 million in transactions. And when I unfortunately left that startup, I suddenly found myself at home with 2 little boys and realized that there was a new opportunity that deserved to be tackled. So, that might not be the perfect example, but something along those lines of like weaving in your journey. Or, often we have founders who start something because of the loss of a family member that inspires them. Here's an excellent time to bring that like deeper why of why you built this. And the other thing that you can do right in this section of the pitch is also talk about some of the macro trends and like why you as a founder, but also why now, like what are the converging trends that make this true? more families are living in big cities than ever before, far away from grandparents and people who can help, and cousins that are entertaining. Or the real estate market is going after multifamily homes, and there's less space for people to play in backyards. Whatever it is, like putting those together with the why you builds credibility and helps them see, yes, that makes a lot of sense. This business makes a lot of sense right now, which is the whole goal. So you can also, this is a great way too to say like the years of experience your team has collectively. So if you've, like we have 40 years of parenting experience, but we also had 40 years of startup experience. And so those are things you can weave in here. So here's some good examples of just like using logos to build credibility for the team. And then also some bullet points around what you want to say in your voiceover. So finally, what we want to do is we want to leave them with something aspirational that they feel like they had a complete story and like the end part of a novel, right? So, often what happens is founders end with their projection slide and they think that the end is like, and when we do all this, we're going to get to 10 million a year in revenue in 18 months. And the problem is that the projections we all know aren't right. They're either too little or too conservative, or they're way, way too optimistic. And so when you leave them on that slide as your final slide and you say something like, and now I'm ready to take your questions, they're like on this like journey of believability, and then you leave them with a thing that like creates doubt, and then you cut it off. And that's not what we want to do here, right? We want to take them on this full circle where they believe that you are the founders to build this business. This business deserves to exist. It's solving a real problem in a market that is not crowded and has this unique insight that's going to allow it to be, a potential unicorn. And so finishing it with something strong about how the world looks different allows them to kind of rest after this journey that they've been on with you. So there's lots of different ways to do this. One of them is to, be aspirational. For Parachute, what we were really trying to do was to help parents spend more meaningful time with their kids, right? So less time booking and shopping for kids' activities and more time being with them. And then also investing in things that will, inspire their children's creativity and passion, hopefully for years to come. And at the same time, we want to make sure that the small business owners that are building these businesses that, really kind of inspire the next generation of kids have the stability, sustainability to not just do the small programs that they do right now, but potentially go on and build more and more opportunities, or at least do it in a way that is lucrative enough that they can have, happy lives while they're doing this thing that brings joy to other families. So we ended with something kind of along those lines. But sometimes it's not going to be so aspirational, right? Sometimes it's going to be like, we're going to bring efficiencies to, developers that's going to allow them to be more confident in onboarding new team members. And the ripple effect of that for a business is potential savings of, $100 million a year across this industry. It can be anything, really. It's really just helping your listener understand why this deserves to exist, and then how the world will look different when it does exist. And it's often something that people talk about when they go and then reposition your opportunity in front of their partners or spouses. Because don't forget, like at the end of the day, and yes, if you're doing a pitch competition, it's happening right there. And the judges are usually deciding pretty quickly. But they're going into a deliberation room to talk about this business. And so they need to have things that sink into their brain as being really noteworthy and ones that they believe. And same thing when they go away and talk about your business to their investment partners or to their spouse if they're angel investors. They need to have like the reason why they're so excited about this business. And this slide often is what kind of anchors them around the why they're so excited. So in summary, we took you on a pitch framework journey that started with contextualizing the problem. Then we defined the problem. Then we said what our solution is. Then we said how it works. Then we said how big this market opportunity is. Then we showed them how we're going to go after that market opportunity. Then we said who else is going after this market opportunity. Then we said, wait, come back, look at all these amazing things we've done, look at our milestones, but then also look where we're going. And then next we said, why us, why now, like why to believe. And then finally, how the world looks different when we succeed. And hopefully with this framework, you get investors to come on board and say, yes, I want to be part of this journey with you. Right. Well, I hope to see you all on the TechRise stage very soon. And if you're not in Chicagoland, I hope you use this framework for any of your pitches. Feel free to ask comments below or ask questions in the comments below, I should say, and we will follow up with answers as much as we can. Once again, I am Desiree Vargas Wrigley, Chief Innovation Officer at P33 and Executive Director of TechRise. And you can apply to be on TechRise anytime at techrise.co/apply.